Right, welcome back to Daybreak. The hashtag is Daybreak. You can text 22422. You can also tweet us at Citizen TV Kenya and Trevor Mbija at ZinziK. We're getting into that discussion on the State of the Nation address. We'll cover you until it actually happens. And Daisy, there's something Senator was just bringing up right now, saying the list that came out, nobody has been prosecuted. By the time the president mentions someone and is privy to certain information, who's failing who here? Is it the institution that is failing the president, or is it that there's a lack of grip in the entire system? Because if he gets the information and he's been told that this person has been accused, we have evidence, and then this evidence is not brought forth, therefore this person is not prosecuted, who's fooling who here?
First of all, I think that the president needs to understand that the burden actually, the buck stops with him, okay? Because he undertook himself to release that list. That list was from EACC. EACC said, these are the people that we are investigating. Now, the president, as you've said, is privy to a lot more information than the ordinary citizen. So by the time he was making or taking that step, he must have felt that it was the right thing, given the weight of evidence that was presented to him. So the question that we should be asking ourselves is this: one, why then would the president, after having named these people or presented a list of these people, why would he go ahead to appoint some of them as ambassadors? Because right now we have the case of ambassadors that are being recalled or that have been mentioned or that are in the dock. Why would he go on to appoint them? Why would his party allow some of these people to run on the party ticket and even go on to be elected in different offices? So the president is failing himself on this. Yeah. The other thing I think that I really want to say is, we have been seeing the Auditor General's reports, and this should be a cause for concern, because if the president's focus is corruption, the Auditor General's report raises seriously alarming issues. You have ministries, departments, and agencies of government that are allocated hundreds of millions and billions of shillings, but when the auditor goes in to audit them, there are no receipts. There is no trail of how money has been spent, yet money has been used up. And so I often wonder, when we see the president sitting and having cabinet meetings, does he raise these issues with his cabinet secretaries to ask them? Because ideally, the Auditor General's report should actually be the basis for investigation, you know, because he is there to audit the trail of monies in government and to assure that monies have been properly spent. So these are questions that I often ask myself, because we have a lot of busyness around the whole thing of anti-corruption. Ethics and anti-corruption are constantly investigating, and I do think that there's a measure of goodwill for them to do their duty, but I also think that there's a lot of interference, you know. In fact, I am especially alarmed when I hear politicians really insisting, let the EACC do their job. This is their mandate. I'm like, do they have something in there? They know that they can scuttle things in here. Of course, we know that the EACC doesn't have prosecutorial powers, so maybe they know that they can run rings around them. So for me, I think that the president needs to have a master plan on how he's going to engage with corruption. Not just in terms of, because, you know, we see these isolated 21 billion dams, but we know there's more than 21 billion dams. We have on issues of healthcare. Let's talk about even Big Four. See, Big Four, you're talking agriculture, you're talking healthcare, affordable healthcare, manufacturing and food security. So a lot of these are already bedeviled with corruption from way back, you know, and we also need to see some of these corruption issues being dealt with. We have containers that still lie at the NYS yard, you know. We don't see much happening around that, you know. We have opaqueness in procurement, you know, lack of following the law. This corruption can't just be seen as fiscal corruption. Even the way we circumvent the law is circumvented. Right. You know, there is corruption in the application of the law, in administration, public finance administration, where people are cutting corners, where people are doing underhand things. So this thing is so much wider than people just talking about people have done a smash and grab. We're looking at the possibility that the government the public finance administration of government at both national and county level is actually broken.
Okay. Kevin, let's pick it up from what Daisy was talking about, the ESCC as well. Just within the same breath, we've seen changes within the DCI, the DPP, and the ESCC. But is that enough?
Daisy, that is not enough. And it's not enough to say that because let's look at the way politics is organized in this country. That the closer you are to the center of power, the more the chances are that one, you will become a governor or a senator, or rather you will be elected into public office. And that once you're elected into public office, chances that you will be closer to the billions, very high. But then if you look at the people who organize institutions, so that we talk about leadership, governance, and government, the people who organize the machinery behind running a government are the same people. So they know who becomes DCI, they know who becomes ODPP, or rather the DPP, they know who becomes even head of EACC. So chances that then a common citizen will have a say, which is why I many times agonize with our organizing of government, so that then we decided to take away the power of the citizens to even vet the people who become head of police, for example, Inspector General of Police, among others. Then when mega, minor, and major corruption shows up, the citizens keep asking, where is ODPP, where is DCI, where is the president, and all that. That therefore takes away the role of the citizen in ensuring that there is a future which can be guaranteed by putting a government in place. But look at it this way. The highest bidder who comes to my village with a sack of money is the one who becomes my leader, is the one who becomes my governor. What does this mean? It means therefore that if Zinzi wanted to be a women rep for Nairobi tomorrow, we will judge you on the purview of how much money you will have stolen, because we know how much the president earns every month. We know how much the deputy president earns. We know how much a school teacher in my village will be able to earn. So I can do my mathematics and know that by the time you want to run for office in 2022, I will know how much you will be able to have in your account, even if I don't have the exact figures.
All right.
So what I'm saying, therefore, is that we need to take this discussion from the president's doorstep, because I think, again, as a senator said, we don't expect the president to go and arrest people, but he is given powers to certain people to exercise that authority. Yeah. The citizens, you and I, and the many of us who are watching us, need to consider this. The president has said, if you have any issues against anyone, go to Kiambu Road. Yes. What does that mean? It means, therefore, that tomorrow, DCI can say we do not have a track record of citizens who have made allegations on any individual. Okay. And these people will be cleared to run for office. Right. Then you realize that the circle of corruption and the circle in which service delivery will be messed up will continuously proceed.
Okay, we have a caller online, Dan from Nairobi. Dan, good morning.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning. Go ahead with your comment or question, Dan.
Now, I want to say this, Trevor. Yes. This country is choking in the hands of corruption.
Okay.
And before anybody talks about the big four, you must have to deal with the question of corruption in this country, because we know very well that a part of our budget is actually lost in corruption. Like now we're talking about PRA to collect about 1.8 trillion. Yeah. But remember, out of this 1.8 trillion, 600 billion is to be lost. Now, how can you talk about the big four agenda if we cannot be able to sort out the question about corruption? And therefore, to me, the best thing the president can do before he talks about the big four agenda, let him deal with the question of corruption, where we actually, as a country, are losing a lot of money. What is he doing to strengthen the office of the Auditor General right now, especially when we know the reports that are coming from the office of the Auditor General year in, year out are implicating many of the offices in government? What is he doing about strengthening that office so that it has capacity to be able to deal with the issues of corruption, right from the national government to the county government, where we're seeing Kenyans losing, taxpayers losing money? And therefore, to me, the best the president can do before he talks about the four agenda, the big four agenda, let him deal with the question of corruption. And then from there, as Kenyans, we'll be able to get money that is going to sort out the big four agenda.
All right, Dan. Thanks, Dan. That's Dan from Nairobi. Very, very irate about the whole corruption thing. Senator, you're the one who brought this up. What would you like to see? Because you're in the circles of government, and you mentioned the president just mentioned names, they've been appointed again. What would you like to see? Is the president held captive, so to speak? Is there more that he can do?
You know, in terms of arrangement on how power is acquired, you know, it is not even about the person who owns that or who takes up the big position or seat, that probably is the one that makes the decisions. Somebody is propelled to certain position because of interest. And this is the most unfortunate thing, because when people have different interests, they always permanently influence the person that has the authority to ensure that their interests are taken care of. What am I saying? I am saying that, for example, when you find people forming coalitions, organizing themselves in groups, and agreeing on a table that we want to support so and so, it's because either they want to do business with that government, or they feel that whatever agenda that they take to the end of state or wherever it is, then it will have the least resistance. So even in this case, there are some things you can't just rule out, because it's normal, it's natural. These things happen. But like one time I went to Britain, when I had an engagement to the Foreign Affairs and Relations Committee. Those people that fund those governments during campaigns are the biggest beneficiaries of government tenders. Similarly, this happens in Kenya. And whether the right processes were followed or not, at times may not even matter so much. So I think the president, as you are saying, has a duty to ensure that the team that takes advice, or gets advice from, is a team that is completely without blemish.
Yeah.
Because when you look at the requirements of one getting to an office, say for example, of a state officer of the level of a High Court judge or a cabinet secretary, Article 73(2)(1) is clear. It's on the basis of competence, integrity, and suitability.
Yeah.
Competence, suitability, and competence. But now the question is, as many people are asking, if, for example, you are being given a position to run a ministry, and you've had an opportunity to serve in different other capacities, maybe either of an end of a parastatal, all on board, where you were in charge in the public administration of resources for that particular institution. And the office of the Auditor General, being an independent office, has given disclaimer opinions on the manner in which public finances were run during your time in that office. Would we expect you to operate differently?
No.
In my view, it's no.
Right.
So we have really to agree.
Yeah.
If this is the criteria, or if we are very serious on this, then we must agree that, for example, and I agree with the gentleman that just called, that the office of the Auditor General requires serious capacity building. Capacity building in terms of giving them money, for example, to have enough personnel to deal with the aspects of, for example, an auditor element on value for money aspect. Because without that, and most of our audits have been quite procedural. You will not know whether when you talk about a dam costs 21 million, whether actually that dam is worth that 21 million or would have been done at 5 million. Yeah. So these are some of the things that we need to deal with. Okay. And secondly, say, for example, please, with this, because I'm just using case examples which I've personally seen. As I said earlier, I was in Samburu last week with the Committee on Public Accounts, and we were trying to check on the projects that have been done in Samburu. What shocked me, and this is what I would personally expect even the president to address himself to in his nation address, because it ties well with his the Big Four agenda on universal health care. Yeah. There is this thing that I call the MES, the Medical Supplies Equipment Scheme. The shocking news that I got when we went, and this is a case example of Samburu. Every county in this country has been paying 200 million shillings every year from their revenue, and it's deducted at source. It's not given for them to pay. It's deducted. And what did we find out? One, every governor says there was no public participation, we were not involved, we were not asked, and we were only told that we will give you a CT scan, we will give you an autoclave, we will give you a radiology machine, we won't give you these things.
Even if you don't need them.
Even if you do not need them. Now that is the most serious thing. So when we went to Samburu, we went to Marala Hospital and Baragoi. We found CT scans there packed for 2 years. They are not operational. Right. They are not operational. And that's not the only reason.
Lack of capacity or infrastructure? Or both?
There is no infrastructure. There was no infrastructure. Whether you had infrastructure or not, they were being dumped there. Whether you have capacity or not, they don't even have capacity personnel. Because we have even asked that question. They do not have people.
Right,
and finally, please, on this one, we were also shocked because we have people that have interest in medical field and others. A CT scan is being paid for 260 million shillings when in the normal market goes through around 80 or something, and they're all from China. So these are questions we must ask.
So it's even cheaper to buy.
It is even cheaper to buy. So this is the worst, biggest scandal in this country. Yes, people want medical equipment, but when you come up with these issues, we have not had anybody saying DCI, EACC, first of all, investigate. Let's not know how the policy came about. This was an involved function. How it was, the involvement was critical.
So, Senator, for you, it's the issue of value of money. Speaking of which, of course, in just a few minutes, we'll cross over to Parliament, where our very own Wahiga Maura is on standby. He will be talking to a few of the lawmakers right there. That is in Parliament in just a few minutes. Those are live images from Parliament, where President Uhuru Kenyatta is set to give his State of the Nation Address 2019, hopefully later on in the afternoon. Let me come to the economists that we have here. Tony, speaking of value for money, which the Senator has clearly well put out and analyzed within the Health Department, let's tie in the economy to corruption. So within the first quarter of 2018, our GDP was at about 5.8% within the first quarter. The same quarter for 2017, it was about 4.5%, of course an upgrade from that. But the success of the country's GDP, does that translate to the pockets of the common wananchi? Are Kenyans feeling it within their own pockets?
Okay. Your question is important, because the biggest conversation that we need in terms of corruption is about the opportunity cost of that money. If you're talking about 21 billion dam, how much can 21 billion do in education sector, in the health sector? So if somebody is embezzling around 7 billion, you look at what is the opportunity cost in the education sector. How many kids can be financed in education at 7 billion? And that's the biggest conversation that we miss when you talk about corruption, the opportunity cost of it itself. So in terms of translation to the GDP, the pervasiveness of corruption is that money goes to a few, goes to a few people at the expense of the many. So there are people who are denied social services because there are people embezzling funds somewhere else. And the biggest problem with that is that you have an inequality problem. In terms of slowdown of the economy, there are many things that are conflicting. You talk about there is a slowdown of the economy itself. So you put that with corruption, you find that we have a serious problem in terms of economic problem in this country. So one of the main things that we'll need to discuss, maybe the president will set a conversation, is that what is the way forward in addressing our economic problems? One is corruption, the other things that may follow up later. But the biggest problem that we need to address is that how can we stem corruption? And I like what Daisy said. I think the problem is that we don't have a master plan that people are following, especially the executive. This is the first step, this is the second step. If you're stepping aside, what is the next step? There's no problem about stepping aside because it's done everywhere. It's creating an integrity threshold. So when you step aside, it doesn't mean you're guilty or you're innocent. It means that for now, you're stepping aside because there's an integrity issue, and so what is the process that comes up later? So if you set a bar like the president did in 2015, you need to hold that bar as we continue getting forward. My last point is that there is a provision in law about that the Attorney General has been empowered. We've not seen that provision being used in law. It's called the anti-bribery, anti-money laundering law something. There is powers within the Attorney General that you can seize properties that are related to money laundering. You listen to the DPP last time, he said that most of the people who steal this money squander it on material stuff.
we need to see the implementation of that law, that people who embezzle funds don't get the opportunity to have or enjoy this money. So we need to see, even if you're taking people to court, seizure of properties that are related to corruption that equate to the people who are being taken to the process itself.
Okay. Yes. I want to get your final remarks really quick, Daisy, before we go to Parliament, where the action will be today. You bring up the issue of the 2/3 gender rule.
Of course. That is part of the president's obligation, both local and international obligations. Kenya has the provision in the constitution. The president has never, at least his administration has actually never honored this commitment to the not more than 2/3 gender rule. We've seen Parliament struggling to put in a mechanism. The last State of the Nation address, I think the president congratulated Parliament for fully implementing the constitution, yet Article 100 of the constitution has never been implemented. Article 81B and C of the constitution have not been implemented. These are inclusivity clauses. The president, one of the BBI issues is talking about the issue of inclusivity. So inclusivity of women, that's half of your population, youth, that's 70% of your population, and persons with disability, which make up about 12% of your population. So in failing to put in place inclusivity measures, the president is actually excluding a huge section of the population. The 2/3 gender principle is one that he has paid lip service to. His cabinet, even for appointive, because we've understood that there's the challenges in Parliament, you know, where Parliament, you know, for whatever reason, they refuse to implement it. But even in his appointments, his cabinet is not compliant. The civil service is not compliant. Parastatal appointments, ambassador appointments are not compliant. So I hope the president will address himself to that issue. Okay. The other thing is on the issue of the inequality. You see, because when you talk about national cohesion, the national values and principles of governance, which is what the president must give an update on, when you talk about the cohesion issues, you can't run away from the inequality gap. Oxfam just released a report in which it showed 8,300 Kenyans have more than 99.9% of Kenyans. 8,300 people hold more wealth than 44 million Kenyans. Now, that is a recipe for chaos, okay? Because even you talk about GDP growth, it is measuring the infrastructure development and everything. But what it is, it's also translating to jobless growth. Now, joblessness, this unemployment, the inequality gap is a breeding ground for other challenges that we face. High crime rates. We already have heard it. Young people engaging in crime. We've seen a lot of extrajudicial killings of young people who are engaged in crime. Crime has now become an option for livelihoods. So the president must tell us what is he doing to address the huge inequality gap and the unemployment problem, because he cannot run away from this. And the Big Four has that opportunity of giving that to us, but he needs to tell us the how. You know, not tell us that we're doing well with the Big Four.
It's the how.
It's the how. So I think, I can't run away from this. No. Let me also say this.
Very briefly.
When it comes to food security, the president must address the issue of Galana Kulalu. The minister in charge cannot tell us it's a proof of concept. They promised us that Galana Kulalu was going to give 7 million bags of maize.
Where's the maize?
They put per year. And then it turned out it was producing 7 bags per acre. And then after sinking in over 7 billion shillings, the minister in charge tells us that it was a proof of concept. How is it possible that this man still remains in office? How is this even possible?
All right, Kevin, very briefly,
Trevor,
because we have to go to Parliament.
Kenyans, we have to get off our comfort zones and begin to organize around the sovereignty that is guaranteed to us by the Constitution. We must disrupt how power is organized in this country, because as I said, and I think the Senator emphasized, that the highest bidder in many cases becomes, or knows who becomes president for very selfish interests, and of course at very different levels, including the level of the MCA. We must begin the conversation around disrupting that, so that tomorrow, as residents of, say, Dennis Sprit Road, we can say Trevor will be our governor for Nairobi, and we support you, we campaign for you, we give you all the resources. The second thing is, there's going to be, yes, which is the last one. There's going to be a time when you sit in a restaurant and people come and say, nipe chakula na uli ndugu atalipa. And when you fail to pay, they will follow you to your home. And they will sit there and say, how come you are driving 2 cars and I'm walking on foot because I can't pay matatu? Okay. We must be able to have a conversation around citizens and stop lamenting over everything. Because I think we have spent too much time lamenting. Okay. Let's begin to organize ourselves and take power.
All right. Senator, very briefly, we have to go to Parliament and I hope we'll see you there as well.
Let me close by saying that Kenyans are almost at the verge of losing hope. Yeah. And we expect the president to, in his speech, to come with tangible ways and methods of trying to inspire them. Okay. And I think our legal framework in terms of trying to provide for job opportunities have been quite clear, because we came about in the procurement law about the 30% of revenue for vulnerable groups. But I can tell you, with those good ideas, because of failing government to pay people in good time, without counties being able to pay people in good times, all these groups and many other Kenyans have now been condemned to poverty because they are providing services to government, either national or counties, and they are not being paid. And as we were saying, crime is almost now becoming an option for livelihood. That is what they are taking us. So get organized, organize money, ensure that, because the PFM Act says that you don't engage in the contracts when you have no capacity to pay. Adhere to the law, because we have enough laws. Otherwise, we are bringing a lot of criminals.
Okay, and yet we've seen certain companies being paid before the job is done. Tony?
Mine will be on debt.
Very briefly.
The biggest issue that we have is about the debt. That I hope the president will rise to the occasion, because we have a debt problem. Okay. Despite them not agreeing with that, I think it's something that we need to face.
All right. Thank you so much for making time this morning. We'll have another post-analysis once the State of the Nation address is done, and see if the issues you've raised will be addressed. Senator Mithika Linturi Meru, Senator, thank you so much. Daisy Amdanyi, political analyst, Sante Kukuja, and Kevin Osido, governance expert, and Tony Watima, economist. When we come back from this short break we're taking right now, we'll go straight to Parliament. Waiga Maura is there with some MPs, of course. He'll be speaking to quite a number of them to find out the expectations from the State of the Nation address, which will be happening in the afternoon. Until then, we will still be right here until the President addresses the nation. See you in just a bit.